Welcome back to Lens on Africa. It's time for our weekly conversation, and our conversation today will focus on threats to democracy in West Africa vis-a-vis the acceptance speech of His Excellency President Ahmed Bola Tinubu as the new African chair. Here is a short video background to set the pace for this conversation.
We will not allow coup after coup West Africa's president. We will take this up seriously. We must bite back. We can't sit like toothless bulldog and ECOWAS. We should make a pledge here that in furtherance of our region's economic recovery and growth, we will commit to democracy and promote democracy and rule of law. I am with you. In Nigeria, we are back.
Joining this discussion via Zoom are Associate Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, Africans, representative at the United Nations Working Group on Mercenaries, Dr. Chris Kwaja. It's good to have you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Nigerians.
Good evening. Also joining us via Zoom is Oladele John Nihi, Vice President, West African Pan-African Youth Union. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
All right, the first question, Professor Kwaja, I'm going to ask you this question first. Many have said that the speech of the president was emphatic, it was strong, and it was a welcome departure from the past. Now, what is your critical view or analysis of the new Africa's Chair's speech?
Thank you very much. I think
Can I go
in
to
the last couple of years, we've seen Nigeria.
Oh, it's Associate Prof. So do we call him Dr.
Chris Kwaja? Yeah, in the last decade, we've seen Nigeria taking a back seat in ECOWAS on issues relating to ECOWAS, despite the huge resources that Nigeria has deployed to ECOWAS. First, ECOWAS is Nigeria's baby. In 1975, when ECOWAS was established, the president of Nigeria, the head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, and the president of Togo, Eyadema of Togo, Nasimbe, were the two people that midwifed the creation of ECOWAS as a regional economic institution, as a catalyst for economic development within West Africa. In the 1990s, we saw a shift in that agenda because of the security challenges that West Africa confronted. And in that light, we saw how Nigeria spearheaded the establishment of ECOMOG as a ceasefire monitoring group, as a standing force for ECOWAS on issues relating to the containment of conflict and other threats to lives and property within the region. But after that, we saw a withdrawal on the part of Nigeria, not really taking on that role, despite the fact that globally, Nigeria is viewed as a hegemon. Nigeria is viewed as the powerhouse of Africa and West Africa in particular. The speech that President Tinubu made was a reaffirmation of Nigeria's power, which he is projecting as the image of the country. And I think for me, I commend him for that speech. We must go beyond the speech to really put in place some of the key building blocks for a country like Nigeria in terms of how it can project all elements of its national power towards restoring peace, security, and stability in the West African region.
Talking about some of those building blocks in a moment, but before we do that, let's hear from Mr. John Nihi.
Thank you very much once again. The news of the emergence of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu as ECOWAS chair actually came not as a surprise because of his leadership track record, particularly within the last few weeks of his assumption in office. I think the ECOWAS leadership were being very strategic in having the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and at the same time, the country Nigeria as the chair of ECOWAS. As the professor has said, ECOWAS was formed 48 years ago. And interestingly, it was formed in Lagos. It was bettered in Lagos. And today, Nigeria housed the headquarters in Abuja. So obviously, in the past 48 years, Nigeria has contributed immensely to the formation and even growth of ECOWAS. But having President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and listening to his acceptance speech, it rekindled hope, not just in the ECOWAS sub-region, but also across Africa. Because as you are aware, the countries, the 15 countries that make up ECOWAS, actually make ECOWAS the largest region in Africa. And Nigeria, as the largest with the largest population in Africa, also within the ECOWAS, has given us not just strength as ECOWAS, but strength as the continent of Africa. And we are very, very, very proud because just by the acceptance speech, the president has actually displayed that it is not business as usual. And he stated it emphatically that the ECOWAS will no longer sit like a toothless bulldog, but will begin to bite. And these are strong words. And the African youth, particularly the youth of West Africa, are strongly behind the chairman of ECOWAS in person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He has started well by his speech, and we hope and we believe that he will begin to match those words with action by piloting ECOWAS, which indirectly is also leading Africa to its liberation.
Nihi, I'm going to get back to Professor Kwadwo. I'm going to get back to you on this one. We've talked about the significance of the speech, the fact that it was a welcome, emphatic, strong speech. So my question is, how significant in the myriad of West Africa's problems, how significant are terrorism and military coups and mercenaries in the West African sub-region? How significant are they a threat to our democracies and our way of life?
Presently, West Africa faces a huge governance, security, and humanitarian challenge. The activities of non-state armed groups, the activities of terrorists and mercenaries in particular, in terms of the fluidity, the level of coordination, the sophistication, and the transnational character of their structure makes it very complex to deal with. Because when we talk about insurgents and mercenaries within the West African region, we are also talking about other contiguous regions, North Africa and other regions that have made it easy or possible for mercenaries and terror groups to move freely, to recruit freely, to have access to small arms and wide weapons freely, to even have surface-to-air capabilities freely. And we've seen how across the region, they have demonstrated that capacity, they have used it. My caution is that as we look at, as we become too optimistic, or too optimistic about what President Tinubu can do, will do, or should do, we need to also bear in mind that President Tinubu is chairing an institution or a community of West African states where each president is having equal stake in the institution. Now, in that context of a coalition of equals, there is a limit to what an individual can do. What the president should do is to ensure that he deploys all elements of diplomacy in winning the trust of each member of this institution. If he is not able to do that, it becomes difficult for him to assert himself or even take on policies or decisions or agendas that he has crafted. And we've seen that with Guinea today. We've seen that with Mali, where the leadership of these countries have chased out the French troops out of their country. We've seen also where sanctions have been imposed on Mali and Guinea, but the leadership of these countries have shown or are even saying that we don't care about the sanctions that you are imposing on us. And what it does is to say that beyond ECOWAS, the president of Nigeria should use the goodwill he's having to mobilize other leaders across the continent and beyond. France is very key to this conversation because Nigeria is one out of the 5 English-speaking countries within ECOWAS. The other 10 are French-speaking, and these 10 countries have France as a very strong ally that they've been with since independence.
Excuse me, we will go a little further. I don't want us to go into the issues of France and the other non-state actors just yet. I'll come back to that question and we will trash it out more thoroughly. So I also want to hear from Mr. Nihi on this particular issue, on the scope. We have many problems in West Africa. Some would argue that the coups and terrorism may not be as significant as we think it is. Mr. Nihi, in your opinion, was the new African chair and the president of Nigeria accurate in his target as dealing with these issues of coups and military infractions in African democracies?
Thank you. The new Africa ECOWAS chair, the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has made it emphatically clear in his statement. The advantage of having the new African chair is two. The first is the fact that the new chair is the president of Nigeria. And we all know that Nigeria is the big brother of Africa, not just ECOWAS. The role Nigeria plays within ECOWAS and African continent at large.
Sorry, Mr. Nihi, just a moment. We'll come to the role of Nigeria specifically, and we have a lot to talk about that. Nigeria is dealing with its own fair share of issues. But I wanted us, before we go there, to lay the background of, is the significance, because a lot of us, there's an argument out there that terrorism is not as significant as the issue of hunger, military coups and armed threats are not as a significant as the issue of education in Africa. So my question is, at this point in time, is how significant of a threat is the military coups, conflicts, and all the non-state military actors across the West African region?
Military coup in West Africa is very, very significant. It is a very big problem, and that is why the ECOWAS chair made it emphatically clear that this coup will no longer be tolerated within the sub-region. And even it's not acceptable even in Africa. And that's why I was trying to lay the foundation that coming from not just the ECOWAS chair, but coming from the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, gives it a very, very strong backing. And as you know, even within the youth constituency, when we sit down on the round table across the continent as youth leaders and we are discussing, all the member states representatives are eager to hear what the Nigerian rep has to say. This has gone to show that Nigeria is not just like any other country. Nigeria is a country that even the other countries within West Africa and Africa at large are looking up to. And if the president of Nigeria, who now doubles as ECOWAS president or chairman, is making the statement, obviously is a very strong signal to even countries like Burkina Faso that is currently having the challenge of a coup, and the other countries within the West Africa. So as far as we are concerned,
sorry, Mr. Nihi, thank you very much, but you still haven't answered the question, Mr. Nihi. Sorry, Mr. Nihi, sorry to interject once again. Your point is taken. However, the question is not the significance of Nigeria's involvement or his presidency's statement. The question is, based on the facts on the ground across the West African continent, how significant of a threat is it? But I'm going to ask you this one before I go, this other question before I go back to Professor Kwaja, is that considering Nigeria's own situation, we have a huge issue here dealing with terrorists and armed groups across the nation. Is Nigeria in how possible is it for the Nigerian government, the new president of Chile, to exert the required moral suasion over his other counterparts and make us believe that this is going to be dealt with?
Thank you very much. I think the sitting chair is actually trying to do that. First, they say charity begins at home. If we get it right in Nigeria, by making sure that the new military chiefs and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces put our acts together in Nigeria, tackle the current insecurity in the northeast, the headers-farmers clash in the north-central, and even the terrorist activities in the northwest. If we are able to tackle all this within the country, that will now place us in a very perfect position to be able to replicate that in other West African countries. You will remember that those days, Nigerian troops are actually used as fighting combatants in curbing insecurity in other West African regions. So we want to go back to those old days. And we are very happy that the new president of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has actually shown the leadership by changing the service chief and has also met with them and charged them. If Nigeria can get it right in terms of securing our borders, in terms of securing lives and property of Nigerians, very well, Nigeria and West Africa will be able to get it right. And with the powerful statement of the chairman, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of ECOWAS, he has made it clear that all the other presidents of states within the West Africa will be rallied round, and they will have to sit down to see how we can tackle this insecurity. Because where there is insecurity, there cannot be development. Where there is insecurity, there is no guarantee to even life and property. So obviously, the security situation is worrisome, but with the actions and statements of the chairman of ECOWAS, who also doubles as the president of Nigeria, we are very optimistic that all these things will become a thing of the past, and West Africa, even Nigeria, will begin to breathe a breath of a fresh air.
Thank you very much. So, Professor Kwaja, now I'm going to ask you the question. Like he said, His Excellency, the President of Nigeria and the new chair of ECOWAS has first of all shown emphatically in Nigeria by a strategic reorganization of the Nigerian security apparatus, and then he's gone on to ECOWAS to declare a very emphatic and forceful statement that these things are not going to be allowed because the issue of security touches everything. It touches economy, it touches education, it touches social things. Now, my question at this point in time is, what does the president, what are the practical next steps as we round out, the practical next steps that the president has to take to ensure that there's a proper follow-through in these actions?
Yeah, at the beginning, I talked about the three key areas that need to be addressed. Governance in terms of restoring democracy and strengthening the institutions of democracy. I talked about security, and I talked about the humanitarian situation we faced that is being sustained or perpetuated by mercenaries, insurgents, and other criminal non-state armed groups across the region. For me, looking at the West African landscape, we already have a model ECOMOG was a model. The multinational joint task force that is active within the Nigeria, Chad, Niger, Cameroon border is a model. What we need now is a quick audit of where the MNJTF is, what are the lessons learned, and how we can use that to propel the re-establishment and strengthening of an ECOWAS standby force that will be charged with the responsibility of dealing with security challenges within the region. As it stands, we don't have it, but this is doable. This is practical. It's a very practical thing. All we need to do is to get the chiefs of defense staffs of the West Africa region to sit down and come up with a blueprint of the human resources they need, the kind of equipment they need, and do a mapping of how to really spread these resources in terms of the kind of quick wins that they are going to achieve. The second is about governance. How do we strengthen democratic governance within the region? Leadership by example is very key. The rule of law is one of the key signposts to strengthening democratic governance. And as Nigeria is looking at what to do with coup d'etats within the West African region, we should bear in mind that when coup d'etats took place in Mali and Burkina Faso, they were celebrated by the people of these two countries. Now, where you have a coup that is celebrated by the people of the country, it makes any intervention complex. And that was why ECOWAS had a huge challenge telling these individuals, the coup juntas, to say, go back to the barracks because of the huge populist support that they were getting. Now, one key area of focus is to go back to the drawing board around
I might interject here.
Nigeria.
Hello? Okay. Sorry, Professor, if I might interject here, the key issue you mentioned of the popular support for because of the economic situation, the people in the country supported. One of the key things that the President and the new ECOWAS chair pointed out was the issue that we can no longer, and he was very emphatic about it, we can no longer allow our West African people suffer unduly. So I think that issue was also very key on his burner, and he's addressing it. Now, because we're running out of time, unfortunately, I'd like us to get our last words on this topic. What would you like to tell to the West African people and to the new Africa's chair? I'll start with you, Mr. Nihi. Mr. Nihi, so I was saying again that the issue is, your last words, what would you like to say to the West African people and the new African chair? Your last words.
My statement first is to the new West African chair. By tomorrow, I'll be traveling to Cape Verde, where the UNOWAS is hosting youth leaders within West Africa on finding solutions to some of these insecurities that we are facing. My advice is that the president must rally around his colleagues within the West African sub-region to make sure that in their respective countries, youths are involved in these processes. Prof has spoken extensively about democracy and governance generally. But the truth is that 75% of those who are involved in this insecurity are young people. And 70% of those who are equally affected are young people. So it is important that the youth are not just pushed aside. If you go to Burkina Faso, you will see the new man in charge is a very young man in his 30s. So this means that we need to get the youth involved. And these youths are not pushed around.
It is important, your last words were, it is important that the youths are not pushed aside, because 75% of both the people affected and the people involved are youths. So now, Associate Professor Kwaja, your last words, sir.
I think that intergenerational dialogue is very important. Yeah. Because the decisions to go to war is always taken by the old. But the young are the ones who go to fight and they die. And I think for me, at the heart of this conversation is the role that leadership and governance place and is very central to dealing with the issue of security, is very central to the issue of dealing with the huge humanitarian crisis that we have today. So President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should look at how well he will use governance, good governance, as the launching pad for spearheading the security of the region and addressing the humanitarian crisis that the people of West Africa are confronted with.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Chris Kwaja. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Mr. John Nihi, it's also been interesting having you and listening to your perspective.